Welcome to our Shabbat live stream with Pastor Sam and the Gospel Gunslingers. We're here in the coffee house. Should have good Wi-Fi, should have good sound, should have good reception. Got a number of things to chat about. Of course, it's kind of an open forum and a free-for-all while people are coming in. We do take questions. If you're a new person that hasn't followed much, please check out my main site, gospelgunslingers.com. We are correcting the blatant homoerotic doctrinal error that has become so prevalent in the church. Most people just don't even understand they're part of the vine of Sodom. A little more direct about that on BitChute. There's a new BitChute exclusive. Of course, if you go to gospelgunslingers.com, there's a BitChute button, and that'll go right to my BitChute. And the main series is Turning the Other Cheek, remedial Bible lesson for dummies. You don't know any dummies who are 100% convinced that Christianity is all about being the victim, being a better slave. They certainly believe that in China. So this is where we unpack a little bit, have some fun. You have to go to Telegram to hear the Bible verse of the day for Gospel Gunslingers. Of course, there's a playlist of the original 99 lessons, 3, 4, 5-minute lessons. The ones today are all 3-minute, just so that we can put them on the radio in a standard 3-minute spot. So there's a lot going on. You know, last summer I came and checked in on the tent revivals, and really the summer before that too, there were just the first pitter-pats of some tent revivals starting to break out. And then last summer we got some significant traction in tent revivals. Of course, the quarantines were part of that, and that means that part of it was fake. So those of us that are free believers, okay, the churches, most all of these churches, you know, these 501c3 churches that are, hate to break it to you, but behind the scenes they're Roman controlled. All their databases, all your tithing records, all your receipts, all of your attendance records, they all go up the flagpole, and all that does wind up in Rome. Some of them are still Protestant in name. So we free believers had to flee the old world to get away from the popes. Of course, they came after us. You know, that's why we have this state of Maryland, because that's where the papists landed to build their own colony, which was truly a colony. We call these colonies, but it's not really true. They were settlements, Plymouth settlement. The thing is, there was a man once called Christopher Colon, and Christopher Colon made the first colonies, colonias, his first settlements in the New World. And he came in with his guns and his cannons and his horses and raped his way across the lower Americas. And that man is known in English as Columbus. Not that I agree with all this anti-Columbus Day BS that's going on, but you need to know that the word colony comes from the name of the man Cologne, and that man is Columbus. So if somebody called it a Columbusy, that would be weird, but they just call it a colony and everybody just accepts it. I guess those who don't learn history are doomed to repeat it. Anyway, the Pope chased us to the Americas, started building their own colonies, their own settlements that worship the goddesses of the Queen of Heaven. And the Lord gave some promises to our forefathers. Promises that they really took hold on. You know, I didn't cough once until I got a hold of this coffee. And the Lord promised that He'd make a great nation. And it was a wild thing for people to believe that they'd ever be free. You know, England was out there, the first Protestant nation. Go to the playlist, Good Preaching, and there is a video called The United States and Britain in Bible Prophecy. It's worth a look. Everybody says the eagle's not in the Bible, not in the end days. America's not in the Bible. Well, I beg to differ. And I think once you really look at it, it's pretty clear that the Lord had a plan for Britain, the first Protestant nation, and He had a big plan for the United States to become a great and powerful nation. So our forefathers believed this. And I'm talking when the Republic was young. So one of my personal theories is that the Napoleonic Wars in Europe were something that God did. He just put Europe into chaos so that, hey, how's my sound? Would somebody just give me a little message if it's okay? This is my new headset. Just want to know that you can hear me. Probably, that sounds like a thunderbolt in that cough. So there were Napoleonic Wars in Europe. Thanks, Mark. And I believe that God did that just so that this fledgling republic of the United States could grow and strengthen a little bit. So the time period that I'm going to talk about is right around 1800, really 1803. So this is before the War of 1812, when Britain made a very viable counterattack. And really the United States had to fight a second war of independence. A lot of people see the War of 1812 as our second war of independence. You know, the British had rockets. That's why Francis Scott Key wrote about it. In 1812 they did it. It was brand new. And I mean, they were huge naval rockets for bombardment. And Francis Scott Key, when he saw the awesome firepower of the British fleet and the number of ships and the weight of cannon fire, and above all that, they had rockets. These rockets were like 30 feet long, and it was basically a metal bomb casing full of gunpowder, and they'd launch that and bombard our fortresses. I think McHenry was the main fortress that they were trying to take out, where the Americans were. A ver si traigo un pesito. Yeah, it was heavy bombardment. So we fought our second war for independence, but in the middle of that, something happened. There were crazy Americans. Now, let's not even start talking about the West. We're going to talk about the Northwest Territory. So the Ohio River comes from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and New England. And that's where the Allegheny and the Monongahela River come together and become the Ohio River. And those are the three. You've ever heard of the Three Rivers Stadium in Pittsburgh where the Steelers play? It's the Allegheny and the Monongahela combined, and then the confluence is the Ohio River, which comes all the way down to the Mississippi. So from that Ohio River, so as it's flowing down, everything underneath of that is West Virginia and Kentucky, and then of course Tennessee down below. Lots of Kentucky. It goes along a lot of Kentucky. And everything to the north of that wasn't states. It was the Northwest Territory. Okay, so now we see this as the East. But that's why Indiana is Indiana. It was the land of wild Indians. It was north of the Ohio River. So Indiana and Ohio and definitely Illinois, those were wild lands, wild lands. In fact, the Indian tribes would come and steal women, and they'd get across the Ohio River. Those women were gone. U.S. cavalry saved some of them. Later treaties, you know, the tribes had to give back the women they'd stolen. They made me a latte. I asked for a cappuccino. It's all right. So I got my new coffee. I think everybody knows that I'm a refugee. I'm in Mexico. That we that are part of the conservative media are hunted. We're a persecuted class. My whole asylum claim is on my Twitter in Spanish. Just go to it, gospelgunslingers.com, hit the Twitter button. Go down to June 30th, and there's my whole asylum claim and all the reasons why I'm here in Mexico really permanently. So I went and got myself some coffee. I've been 14 days, I'm not going to say without coffee, but this is kind of one of my indulgences. You know, my cappuccino cost me 40 pesos. I tipped them another 10 because they know I'm a Trump supporter. No, I tell people that. I say, they say, what? And I say, no, Trump supporters tip, we tip. We do. But this is kind of an indulgence when you're living out amongst the people, in the barrios and in the ranchos, they call the little jungle villages. But everybody drinks, even though they grow coffee in Mexico and it's some of the best in the world, most people drink Nescafe Instant. Like, that is the standard. To find, this is Café de Grano, coffee from the bean, and it's hard to find. You can get it in Oxford and 7-Eleven, but it's not like everywhere. Most people have instant on their table. So this is my indulgence, is I got some Café de Grano, some espresso grind, and some for the French press. So I probably spent 10 American dollars on these. That's a half a kilo, just a quarter of a kilo. So I'll be in good shape for a little while. Problem is, I've converted a lot of people, so they won't drink Nescafe Instant anymore. All my friends, they want me to make them coffee, so I'm happy to do it. So here's these crazy Americans that were in the 13 colonies, and then all of this north of the Ohio River was wild Indians, bears, panthers. You know, it's fields today. You wouldn't think. I mean, Indiana's got some forests, and I guess Illinois has some national forest stuff. They got the Shoshone, I think, or the Shawnee. But most of it was plains. These are the Great Plains. So it was buffalo herds and stuff, and wild lands. There were not settlers really out in those lands. It was largely even unexplored, except along certain rivers. And in the midst of all of that, there were crazy believers that believed in this verse. He shall have dominion also from sea to sea and from the river unto the ends of the earth. And this is the idea of manifest destiny. It comes from this verse, that God would build a massive and potent nation, a nation such had never been on the earth, here in the waste howling wilderness. And people believed this, and President Jefferson was one of the main ones that believed it. Jefferson was really the father of westward expansion. In a time where even northward expansion had not really happened. The Ohio River, man, that was the end of the earth. Get north of that, it was crazy. So we kind of jump in our thinking of the mountain men of the Rocky Mountains and all of that, but that happened way later. So I'm bringing this up because I got friends preaching right now in St. Louis, Missouri. And of course the arch is there, the gateway to the west. this heritage is known to a degree. To another degree, it's not. Moving back even further in 1673, a Jesuit priest, Father Marquette, came from Canada down into Lake Michigan and floated the rivers with voyageurs, you know, wild Frenchmen that paddled canoes 15 hours a day, every day, and traveled all over, and it's just what they did. They had their own pride in being voyageurs. It's what they were, was early explorers, and some Indian guides. So he got to the Mississippi at the town which is called Marquette, Iowa. Got my Iowa colors on today. And then he went on down beyond St. Louis. But when he got past St. Louis, they were very afraid to run into Spanish, because the French and the Spanish were enemies, and they were competitors in the New World. And they each had their territories, but they were really afraid. Father Marquette was really afraid that once, if he went down further, I think he went as far as the Arkansas River, but he was afraid if he went any further, they would get to New Orleans, or they would bump into the Spanish. And of course, here he's gone thousands of miles in a canoe. There's no way they could survive a skirmish with a great power. Maybe a little Indian band, but beyond that, no. So they were competitors at that time. And if anybody ever tells you that the United States, that the Americans conquered this land, it's true. We took this land from the English, from the French, and from the Spanish. We took it, and that's who we took it from. Fair and square. So as time went on, it was the French who really got the dominance in the Mississippi Valley. And then they had possession of New Orleans, and the French colonized further and further up. By the way, they moved in so many Catholic settlers that's why these areas are known for hillbillies in the bayou, and especially in Arkansas. They colonized up there. There was a place called Petit Rock. That's Little Rock for the English speakers. Yeah, the French rocked in there with a whole bunch of Catholic settlers. And we see what that's become. That's where the infection really started to spread into our nation from there. Those were the first overt pedophile devil worshippers that went all the way to the White House. So the French had the dominion in the Mississippi Valley, and by the time you get to 1800, let me skip a little. I'm skipping a little bit. The French named this city St. Louis after their kings. And this is at the confluence of the Missouri River. So, you know, we just fly over and drive over these. There's a bridge there. It's not a big deal. But when there were no roads, these were the highways. And Jefferson had done a lot of research, and so much of it was shooting in the dark. And President Jefferson was obsessed with the exploration of the Missouri River. He was sure that that was the way to get to the Pacific. And he had assembled so many archaic and apocryphal maps and accounts of settlers and voyagers and Indian translators. And Jefferson, as a man of prayer also, he knew that the Missouri River was the great river to get out to the Pacific Ocean. That from the Missouri, you could get to the Columbia, and ships had already been to the mouth of the Columbia and up the Columbia to some degree. The Columbia is a great navigable river, greater than the rivers of the East in a lot of ways. It's a huge dragon in it too, I hear. So these crazy people believed that this Bible verse was for them. Psalm 72:8. He shall have dominion also from sea to sea, and from the river unto the ends of the earth. So in the times of Lewis and Clark, the Spanish controlled all of California and into Oregon. And then at the top of Oregon is the Columbia River. So it was chock full of really enemies at that time to the Americans. So the French named St. Louis, this great city at the confluence of the Missouri River and the Mississippi River, for St. Louis. And they built that city. And there were French inhabitants, but in 1803 it was the Spanish that had the official rule. Now there were some treaties and things that hadn't fully been realized. And when Captain Meriwether Lewis showed up, so this is the famous Lewis and Clark expedition, 1803 in the fall, he showed up with a ragtag band of about 8 guys. He finally brought his strength of his unit up to about 20-something, 26 or something like that. He recruited a lot more people of Southern Illinois than he was supposed to, than he really had authorization to do. But he realized that he needed more men to survive the expedition. So he did what he had to do. And really it's a miracle those guys survived. If you really want to dig into the roots of what made our nation, Lewis and Clark are just, it's, the hand of God is so prevalent. You know, the Spanish general in Chihuahua, Mexico, that had control over their northern territories, heard that the Americans had sent an expedition up the Missouri River, and he sent out 100 soldiers, an entire infantry company, to go to the Missouri River, march to the Missouri River, track them down, and kill them or capture the leaders, and capture all of their documents and maps. Unfortunately, once he got across the Arkansas River, or his team, the general himself did not go, they ran into 200 Indian braves that cut their patrol to ribbons. Very few of them made it back to Chihuahua. Lewis and Clark didn't even know about that until they got all the way back to Washington, and then the news was there. President Jefferson was like, yeah, the Spanish sent an infantry company to hunt you down, and the Lord frustrated them. Those Indian braves just attacked by night again and again, and stole their supplies, just harried them until the few survivors ran with their tails between their legs back to Chihuahua. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how this destiny came to be, and here's why it's important. Because there's a revival meeting right now in St. Louis. And so everybody needs to know that this city is where the United States became a 2-ocean continental power in St. Louis. They're running the grinder, so bear with me. Public Wi-Fi, right? Maybe I'll build a beautiful studio with lights, air conditioning, because I got all my jackets and petticoats on and ties and stuff. I can have a huge air conditioner that's totally whisper quiet. Have that blowing on me, that'd be great. We're not there now though. I jump out of my hammock and come far enough into civilization that I can get some signal at least. So they believed this, that God was going to make of this tiny republic a republic so weak that if God did not set all of Europe into disarray with Napoleonic wars, they would have got enough nations together to easily come crush this republic. By the time Britain attacked, it took them all the way till 1812 to get their fleet together and to get their rockets and all their cannons. And it was a pretty impressive attack. You know, they attacked the underbelly too. They attacked New Orleans. And New Orleans was wild. So my buddy, prophet, brother Dennis Tarpon, he lived in New Orleans for years and cooked in 5-star restaurants there. And so I said to him one time, I said, so where would you go to eat here if this was your last time ever going through New Orleans and you just had one night in town and money was no object? And he said, I'd go to the Court of Three Sisters Cafe. And it's at this place. He told me how to get there, but I Googled it up. So I rocked in there and I said, and what do I order? And he said, you're going to want an étouffée, and you're going to want this, and you're going to want a crawfish bisque. Anyhow, crab cakes. So I went in there and I ate all of that. Probably spent $100 just myself, and I had a New Orleans style coffee, which is the French way. It's got chicory in it. And right there in that court where gospel gunslingers, right, we study all the great battles. Right there in that very court where I was under the arbor, they've got some vines growing up above, and it was nighttime, you know, so the stars and the moon was shining in through the arbor. And there's a plaque on the wall that says, in this very courtyard, the famous pirate Lafitte, or Lafayette, depending on who you ask. But if you ask a New Orleanian, it's the pirate Lafitte. He fought and won 3 separate duels in one night. The pirate Lafitte, right there, in the, I think it's the Court of the Two Sisters. 2 sisters and 3 duels. Anyhow, this is the ancient French city of New Orleans. It's also why there's all this hoodoo. You know, Haitians moved in there after there was a big Haitian slave revolt, I think shortly after 1800, and they brought a lot of voodoo and stuff, but it was already there from the Catholic syncretism. That's why they have parishes, you know. A parish, they don't have counties in Louisiana, they have parishes, and they're so proud of it. And I don't even know if a lot of them know that that is a jurisdictional unit of Catholicism. Yeah. Why would you submit to that? Why would you let the church draw the geographic lines? Well, because France was a papist power and one of Rome's most faithful daughter nations. Yeah, the pirate Lafitte fought 3 separate duels in one night. One guy challenged him, or, you know, an offense rose up. It's kind of in the mists of history, but we do know that it happened. So this is where we sing the song. In 1814, we took a little trip along with Colonel Jackson down the mighty Mississippi. We took a little bacon and we took a little beans, and we met the bloody British in the town of New Orleans. So this was the later stages of the War of 1812, was the British were sure that they could pound their the old French possession, New Orleans, with their cannons and land and come in and take it over. And old Andrew Jackson went down there, and he actually recruited a lot of pirates. Is that who sang that, Mark? He recruited a lot of those pirates. You know, they had shore batteries there around New Orleans, but here's the pirates were expert cannoneers at loading the cannons and aiming the cannons. There's a lot of skill involved in using those old iron cannons, bronze cannons, iron cannonballs. So, and the European powers were ticked off at the time about this, that he went and made a truce with the bloody pirates, to include, legend says, the famed pirate Lafitte himself. That Andrew Jackson met with Lafitte, and Lafitte organized a truce amongst all the pirates, and Andrew Jackson made a truce with the pirates that they wouldn't run them all out of New Orleans because they were out privateering Spanish galleons and stuff, right? So some deals were made, but those pirates manned all the shore batteries in New Orleans. And when the British showed up, the cannon fire was deadly, deadly accurate. Boom, 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 just right on. You know, they expect to be up against marginal gunners, but those pirates had many years out on the high seas of being cannoneers and staking their life on it. They had to get in to take a prize. They had to go in and disable the rigging and damage the ship, and then board, fight hand to hand, swashbuckle with sabers and single shot muskets. So those pirates gave it to the invading British. So we've kind of become known as a nation of rogues. Well, maybe we are a little bit. But back to St. Louis. 1803, Meriwether Lewis arrived, and he went up the Mississippi north just a little ways and set his camp in the Illinois bottoms. You know, they chopped down trees with their axes and built log cabins for the winter, and the men would go out and hunt and gather. Once in a while, Lewis would go in and negotiate a little bit. Now, they had French passports, but they did not have a Spanish passport. They did not have clearance from the Spanish crown to go into the Spanish territories. And the historians said that this was a grave oversight, that they should have done that. But it was really thought, because there were backroom deals, that those territories would be turned over to the French, and then their French passports would be more than sufficient. But it was the Spanish flag that was still flying. And remember how small and how young and how weak the Republic was. It was so weak. For him to show up with a keelboat with a dozen guys to explore the nation on foot, no horses. They traded for horses later with Indians. So they showed up and the Spanish flag was flying. So when my grandpa in 1940, late 1940, joined the U.S. Army Air Corps to learn how to fly heavy bombers to go to Germany, go fight the Germans. The first place that he was put after cadet training was a place called Jefferson Barracks. And I'm sure that this is the same hill over the Missouri and Mississippi rivers, especially above the Missouri. The same place where the Spanish fortress was that was flying the Spanish flag. Grandpa said it was the coldest place in the world. That year they had record low temperatures, and he was out marching and drilling, and they were deathly afraid of making a screw up and getting sucked into the regular army. No more being flyboys. You know, you could screw up a little bit and get demoted from pilot to bombardier and then get demoted and be a gunner, but any significant screw up, boom, straight to the regular army. Be a grunt, be in a trench someplace. The flyboys knew they didn't want that they wanted to fly. They wanted to be above it all. So they tried really hard when they were drilling and marching and practicing everything at Jefferson Barracks, right there outside of St. Louis. So this was a real problem back to 1803. It was a big problem for Lieutenant Meriwether Lewis. They never officially promoted him to captain, although he was promised that rank by the president. You know how Army politics can be. But he went ahead and took what he was promised and billed himself as captain. So Captain Lewis would go into St. Louis from time to time. He would go in there and meet with the Spanish ambassador, whose headquarters was, of course, there. You know, Missouri's backwoods today. Lots of forests. I mean, Mark Twain National Forest, you can get lost in there and never come out. find different dialects of English you maybe never heard. You need a translator. I'm a big old hog, get up on him, I wish you'd have it. What did he say? He said if one of those big old hogs gets up on you, you might wish you hadn't. Imagine the wilderness that it was in 1803. There were a few communities on up the Missouri River, very, very, very small. Captain Lewis took celestial instruments with him so that he could get a celestial fix. He actually went to school for botany, he went to school for zoology, and he went to school for celestial navigation in crash courses. President Jefferson set it up for him to meet with university department heads to give him crash courses in those three things because he was looking for new species, and he brought back many new species of plants and animals. So he was to document them, he was to bring an example, the instructions for the preservation of those were given to him, and he had his sextant to take celestial bearings off of stars. And so when they would, going up the Missouri, get to the confluence of another river, known or unknown, he would take a celestial bearing. Sometimes they had to chop down trees to get right on the confluence of the rivers and get a celestial fix. You know, years later, Grandpa's navigator was trained in celestial bearings, and he had a bubble in the B-17. He sat right behind Grandpa in the middle of the plane, and he had a little observation bubble that he could use his instruments and bring the constellation down, they call it. It's when the sextant is calibrated into the stars. And I think they had 23 navigable stars, and really from one of those, if they knew which one it was, they could plot their position exactly, latitude and longitude. It saved their lives more than once. And that navigator could also pop out the plexiglass and put an M250 caliber machine gun through there, just in case the Luftwaffe thought that they would hide out in that blind spot. That navigator was also trained as a gunner to shoot forward and up. Of course, he had twin 50s back there, and his real navigator was on that. Ran those twin 50s in the Bendix turret, spin all the way around. So Meriwether Lewis took celestial fixes, and that's how he mapped out the Missouri River. And then there are various places. Of course, they found the Clark Fork of the Columbia. They found the Columbia River. They went up into what's now Canada and back down the Columbia River on their way to the Pacific. Made it to the Pacific, got back. There were a number of close scrapes. They did have to use lethal force. The death warrant was out amongst many, many Indian tribes for Captain Meriwether Lewis because he killed at least one brave in a firefight, and there were a lot of people looking for him. But praise God, he made it back. So this is how the West got opened up. It all happened from St. Louis. St. Louis was the stepping off place. So finally, as the spring started to come on, so now this is 1804, the news got to the Spanish ambassador that he was to surrender those territories to France, and France was to surrender the territories to the United States, to the Americans. And this is the famous Louisiana Purchase. So we have a current state of Louisiana, but back then Louisiana was everything from the Mississippi West all the way up through Missouri, South Dakota, Montana, Idaho, Washington State, Wyoming, Colorado, Oklahoma, all the way to the Spanish territories, which was basically Arizona, New Mexico, California, and half of Oregon, and maybe half of Wyoming. All of that was Louisiana. So I believe that the Louisiana Purchase tripled the size of the United States, And remember, the United States had this Northwest Territory north of the Ohio River that was largely unexplored. And to think that they believed this verse, that God was going to make out of all that wilderness a mighty nation that would go from sea to sea. People talk about this today like it's a cuss word. Manifest destiny. It's a real Bible doctrine, and this is not the only place. You know, I don't want to misstate, but it's one of the major prophets tells about a land that rivers divide, a land of unwalled villages, a land of much cattle. And people always take that to mean Israel. It actually says Israel, but really pertains more to New Israel. You know, this is one of the few nations, the United States is a nation with a fixed starting date. These other nations, they just kind of were. And in the old world, you know, their histories go back so many centuries into time immemorial, and they have Arthurian legends, which are pretty apocryphal. And then beyond that, they don't even know. So, the United States is a nation with a fixed starting point. And it's a nation that came out of refugees, really, from other nations. Just some thoughts. We'll maybe talk about that another day. So why has God chosen the city of St. Louis for the kickoff of Him to do a new thing? So 2 years ago, there were little pitter-pats of little tents, people trying to get outside the four walls. Then last year, people really tried to get outside the four walls. But then the four walls started coming out for us. They're trying to box us back in. You know, all these 501c3 churches, they all put in for paycheck protection programs. They got staffs, you know, of secretaries and underpastors and youth pastors. So all of them were getting paid, but they got to figure out some way to survive. Well, we're not allowed, they thought, to have meetings in the building. We'll put up a tent in the backyard, and we'll invite everybody to come to church. Church! We don't have church. It's not really why we have tents, guys. It's to get out of all that. And then this year, there's more tent revivals, and people are celebrating our national pride, our history as a free people, our heritage as a nation under God, our right to govern ourselves, and having gospel preaching in camp meetings. And one of the first ones is right there, right now, today, yesterday got rained out, today, tomorrow and Sunday in St. Louis. It's called Bard's Fest. And I think it's going all right. Well, the Lord, let's pray for it. The Lord intends for it to go all right. The Lord intends to kick off a movement that's going to go from sea to sea. And from the river to the ends of the earth. Imagine how wild. You know, every kid, they're like, oh, I'm going to be an astronaut, I'm going to be a millionaire, I'm going to play for the NFL and the NBA. And a reasonable person thinks, kid, there's 10 million kids saying that, and there's maybe 100 that make it. So your odds are not that good. 1 in a million, 1 in 100,000, who knows? If you try your best, probably not going to happen. Well, what aggressive faith, what proactive hope for our forefathers to believe that this verse was for them. You know, when I start to preach the Bible, Yeah, Google lies. It's not canceled. They canceled the event, and Eventbrite canceled the event and told everybody that had registered and paid an admission on Eventbrite that it was canceled so nobody would come. But it's happening, and there's lots of people there. Just so you know, it's live streamed, by the way, on Brighteon.tv, which is going to have another big kickoff on Monday. So here we are. We're celebrating national pride, popular sovereignty, and our ideals, and the Bill of Rights, and the Constitution, self-rule. Of course, the wicked say that it's racism and hate, and that this is the most hateful book in the world. This is what made America great, guys. And you know what? Us white people, our forefathers were not the chosen, okay? We're a wild olive branch that's grafted into the tree of Abraham too. So, thank God that our forefathers here again were dumb enough, we're hopeful enough in God, we're so unscientific as to believe that God would accept them. Why did God accept white people? They're not. We're not the chosen people. Jesus was very olive-skinned and brown. So thank God, this nation was made of many other nations. There's black Americans, there's Asian Americans. And we all love this place. You know, I was at a protest one time, and everybody was screaming, racist, racist. It was outside of John Cornyn's office. In fact, it's on my YouTube somewhere. And this SUV comes to a screeching halt. We only had about 3-4 people on our side of the street. This SUV comes to a screeching halt, and these women jump out, and they got Women for Trump signs. And I said, where are you from? And the main one says, I'm Vietnamese, I'm half Vietnamese. My parents came from Vietnam, they fled communism. We love America. And here's all these, you know, the leftist professors, and they're trying to call us all racist, and they just look so stupid when this Vietnamese woman told how much she loved America, how glad she was and her family was to be here. He shall have dominion also from sea to sea, and from the river unto the ends of the earth. They that dwell in the wilderness shall bow before him, and his enemies shall lick the dust. Who out there knows that in great wars, the United States shoved everybody's face in the dust? It's what happened to those who hated us, and it might just happen again. The kings of Tarshish and of the isles shall bring presents. The kings of Sheba and Seba shall offer gifts. Yea, all kings shall fall down before him. All nations shall serve him. Yeah, 200 years of Pax Americana. And every nation came and bowed down before the stars and the stripes. And anybody who stood up, they got their face ground in it. They licked the dust. Verse 12, for he shall deliver the needy when he crieth, the poor also, and him that hath no helper. He shall spare the poor and needy, and shall save the souls of the needy. He shall redeem their soul from deceit and violence, and precious shall their blood be in his sight. Our flag is where all the downtrodden of the earth have run. They still run to the American flag. They hold up the American flag just as an idea when there is no embassy to run to, when there is no army or warship to run to. They hold up our American flag as their ideal, that they want freedom. Can you imagine our forefathers believed this when there was nothing? He shall judge the poor of the people. He shall save the children of the needy, and shall break in pieces the oppressor. You know, the United States of America has broken a lot of oppressors. Yeah, we're backslidden. You know, the conservative movement, I got enemies. I got enemies that say that our nation was conceived in iniquity and that it was evil. That's a Catholic doctrine. That people do not have the right to rule themselves. And they can't and they shouldn't. And that our foundational doctrines, the Mayflower Compact, yeah, many people who immigrate here know what real oppression is. Got some drugged out gringos here. It's all right. Those are men of faith. You know, I hang out with a lot of people who think they're tough. And when I read Lewis and Clark, them fighting Indians and grizzly bears, the grizzly bear was a myth. One of Lewis's many objectives was to find out about the white bears. Thanks for coming out, Red Dead Clips. They killed a couple of those bears. You know, being all expert marksmen, they carried 50 caliber short carbine model rock locks, which that's pretty heavy. You know, the standard mountain man gun later on was the Hawken 50. That's what Robert Redford lusted after, was a real Hawken 50. He had to go west with a squirrel rifle. But Lewis and Clark and their men, they had custom built. Lewis had it all built. And he had 2 pocket pistols also. He always carried 2 pocket pistols in his front pockets. Because remember, they're all one-shots. And he got 2 for Clark also. Paid $5 a piece for them. So $20 on their personal concealed carry pistols. Plus, they outfitted their team. And they had air rifles, too, that were repeaters that would shoot 50 shots on one charge. And then they'd have to pump it up all night. They were very sophisticated. They left with the best weapons that there were. In fact, Lewis would give demonstrations to the Indians. He'd have a brave go set a board out at 200 yards, and he'd fire and hit it, and then he'd just fire and hit it again in seconds. And then the brave would bring the board back with the 2 holes in it as evidence. And the fact that it was a repeater, and the fact that he had that kind of accuracy at that range, it was a demonstration that he did. He invited the Braves to do archery demonstrations, and then he did the air gun demonstration. And it really was a warning to the tribes, because they didn't know how many of those repeaters they had, and it scared them that they could repel an assault, that if they were attacked by a superior force, that they would be able to defend themselves and cut down many men. So anyhow, they had 54 caliber muskets. And I believe it was the 3rd grizzly bear they ran into. And Lewis actually wrote, after they'd encountered a couple and killed them with well-placed shots, you know, through the vital organs, he said, while this animal may have been very fearsome to primitive men, for a modern rifleman that properly equipped, it's not really that big of a deal. The 3rd one they ran into took over 50 balls from their 54 caliber muskets. And everybody was running up trees, and it nearly killed some of them. And then this happened multiple times. Another time, 6 men were out, and they came across one sow grizzly, and they made a plan that the first 4 riflemen would fire together as a squad, and then hold 2 riflemen in reserve. Well, the first 4 riflemen, all expert marksmen and woodsmen, shot that bear 4 times through the vital organs, through the heart, liver, and lungs, with 4 of those big, heavy balls, and it charged him immediately. And then their 2 riflemen that were in reserve, they fired their charges. Didn't even slow it down. So now it's every man for himself, scattering and trying to reload their musket while they're sprinting to find a tree or something. Well, eventually they killed that bear, but it nearly got some of them. Those guys were tough. They dealt with winter. They didn't have proper clothes. They made their own clothes out of buckskins. When they got back to the east, they were dressed entirely from head to toe in buckskins. All the cloth, all their sails, everything had rotted out, and they made everything that they returned in. But sure enough, they returned to Washington. One of Captain Lewis's errands when he got to St. Louis was to meet a tailor and have the tailor make him a suit of proper clothes so that he could go and not look like Robinson Crusoe when he got back. Anyhow, those guys, they had faith, and they had physical strength and determination and tenacity and stamina that's just, for somebody who studies war, woodsmanship, soldiering, it's just unimaginable to me. So these are the great heroes. And where do they launch off from? Really, from St. Louis. They brought the keelboat down from Pittsburgh, but it was St. Louis where the team congealed, where they took on volunteers to more than double their number. And Captain Lewis stood in the honor guard as the Spanish flag was lowered and the French tricolor, for there were many French residents. It was announced to the city that you will all be American citizens. These lands have been ceded to the United States of America, and the Spanish residents and the French residents will be granted American citizenship. So the French residents made a request that the French tricolor would fly for 1 day over the fort. And in the handing over process, the Spanish flag was lowered, red and yellow, with the royal crest, and the French tricolor was raised. It was allowed to fly for 1 day. Ceremonial cannonade. There weren't French troops really in the city, so Captain Lewis stood in for some of those ceremonies. And then Captain Lewis raised the flag, the American Betsy Ross flag of the 13 colonies, 13 round stars. And I'm just sure that it was over the very same Fort Jefferson where my grandfather learned to march and drill. Grandpa said that he was guidon bearer, and they had to get to chow, and they had to get there in step. They were dealing with a bunch of farm boys, had no idea how to move as a unit, but they had to get to chow in step, so he sure enough learned them, taught them how to march in step, so that, because otherwise they wouldn't give them any chow, you know, they sent them back up the hill. They had to get there in step. So this is the historic city where the Bard's Fest is going on right now. And I just ask that God would call the past to account, and that He would do a new thing in this place. This very Catholic city. Jesuit universities there, St. Louis University. A big opposing force to anything of the gospel. We bind it in the name of Jesus, and we ask you, Father, to just pour out your Spirit and your love and your power in St. Louis. Now there's one other very important thing. A couple of years after Grandpa marched on the hills of Fort Jefferson, that was 1943 in the winter, and then in 1944 he went off to his pilot training, and shortly after D-Day arrived in England. In 1946, a call came from St. Louis. A telegram, really. So one of my heroes, William Branham, was preaching on up the Ohio River. There's a place called Jeffersonville, Indiana, and the Branham Tabernacle's there today. And that's where William Branham had his home base, and he had a little church and he preached in it for many years. And like so many of the greats, he preached for 10 years without the miracle power of God. They just studied the Bible and dared to believe it. But there weren't people getting miraculously healed. And we're not talking, when this broke out, listen, this caused all the tent revivals. This is where it came from. This one guy. I mean, there was a great pop from Azusa Street in 1906, but in 40 years that had died out. There were Pentecostal churches, but the gifts were not. My friend who was there in a Pentecostal church in the 1940s, Clayton Sonmore, said most people had not even seen legitimate tongues and interpretation in their church, even one time. And this is one of the weaker gifts when compared with working miracles, multiplying food, blinding enemy armies, calling down fire from heaven. That's all working of miracles. And when you gifts of healings, I'm talking about crooked spines straighten out and bedridden people get up. In later years, one of the people that William Branham personally prayed for was Congressman Willie Upshaw. He was, I believe, 60 some years in a wheelchair, and he was a United States congressman from his wheelchair. He wrote books, motivational books. He was a very devout Christian. And when he went to California and met with William Branham, he got up out of his wheelchair. It was in the 1800s that he had his accident. William Branham saw it all. I see a boy on a hay wagon, horse-drawn, and there's an accident and he's falling. And now I see him in bed. Well, this was Congressman Willie Upshaw. So he was a paralytic for over 60 years. And William Branham said, "Thus says the Lord, you're healed in Jesus' name." And he stood up in the back of the sanctuary, and his legs wobbled. He took his braces off. He could walk with canes and braces. Very difficult for him. And he took his braces off and stood to his feet in the Branham Tabernacle. So we're not talking about headaches going away or people that felt a little bad feeling a little better. Goiters, a friend of mine saw Oral Roberts pray for somebody that had a goiter the size of a grapefruit, and it just went pop and snapped back. Other times they'd fall on the floor, a big gushy bloody mass, and the person's neck would be just like before. That's why it's important to supplement with iodine, because lack of iodine is one of the main reasons. Huge goiters. It used to be a real plague. Thank you guys for coming out. Shabbat Shalom. The Lord bless you and have a good rest. Would someone put in the comments that Bard's Fest is not canceled and that it's live stream on Brighteon.tv, right on the main page. So William Branham was preaching. He'd been preaching in Jeffersonville, Indiana, up the Ohio River. So from St. Louis, you cross that southern part of Illinois into Indiana, and then halfway across to the Wabash River, there's Jeffersonville. It's right across from Louisville, Kentucky today. Billy Branham was preaching there, and he went out. He had a place in the woods that he would pray. And he went out there, and he told his wife, he said, "I have to settle this," because the angel of the Lord had presented himself in different forms since he was a young boy. It was terrifying for Brother Branham. And he had mentors that were mainliners, that they believed the Bible to a degree, not the miraculous, not angels coming to Abraham and telling Sarah not to laugh that she was going to have a child at 90 years old. They preached all that, but they didn't believe for it to happen now. Dispensationalists, So some of his mentors were like that. But in 1946, the angel of the Lord appeared to him. He went out to his prayer cave and he said to his wife, he said, "I've got to settle this," because the angel of the Lord appeared in a tree and whooshed. A wind came with a whoosh and stirred all the branches of that tree. And he knew that it was this presence that had followed him since he was a boy. So he went to his wife, Mita, and he said, "I have to go and meet with the Lord. And if I'm not back in 3 days, I may never come back." He thought that this could be the death of him. he was terrified, but at the same time he knew that he had to do this. So he went out and had a little cave he prayed in, and a ball of fire came into that cave. Of course, like all of us mighty men of faith, he's looking for where the light is, right? Or who's got a lantern. No, it's a ball of fire floated right into the cave. And then it swirled, the fire swirled and formed into a man. And there's a man standing there that's on fire and glowing with a long robe on, and sandals. And it was the first time that the angel of the Lord appeared and manifested clearly. And that's when the angel of the Lord told him that it was time for his gift to manifest, that he was going to heal the sick and go all over the world and have a mighty worldwide ministry. So he got over that terror. He understood what was going to happen. And William Branham through the years taught a lot on angelology and went back through the Bible in his meetings and taught how the angel appeared to Moses and many other great heroes of the Bible, and that many times the angel was assigned to them and said, I will go before you. That many times angels bring the word of the Lord. The angel shows up and says, thus says the Lord. So he had his encounter that he wasn't sure he'd survive out in the cave, in the woods, up north in Indiana, where it's still wild even today. There's cliffs up there, and it's pretty crazy hardwood forests. And he came back to his church, and either the same day or the next day was his time to preach. It was time to preach. I'm not sure if it was Sunday or Wednesday. But he stood up, and remember, this was his congregation. These people loved him. They loved him, and they believed in him, and they believed in the call on his life. And they really honored him more than people would think. A small church of 50 or 70 people would honor their little country preacher. They believed that he was a very, very special, that there was a very special call on his life. And he had really lived a singular, noble life as well. In fact, when the angel appeared to him when he was a boy, the angel said, never drink, his father was an alcoholic, never drink, never smoke or defile yourself with women or in any other way, for there will be an important task for you to do when you get older. I preached in another live stream, I think it's deleted now, about how some boys, when William Branham was young, he was maybe 12, 13 years old, expert marksman, squirrel hunter. And there was a girl from his school. Now everybody hated him because he was poor, he was country, he was corn cracker, he was born in a log cabin. And those boys decided, from Ottumwa, Iowa, God bless, such a happy little town. You're not my friends that I met at the coffee house, are you? I have made some friends in Ottumwa, Iowa. They got a little coffee house from a church downtown. And there's some people there that are really trying to come after the Lord. Got to get out the four walls, though. Got to break out. Not just having a coffee house isn't quite enough. And a lot of times, that's to lure people into the four walls. So we got to break out of that. But there's some people that are really trying to get a hold of the Lord's, the corner of his garment. Yeah, it's right there next to the Wells Fargo Bank, if you're interested. So these boys didn't like him because he was poor, because his dad was drunk, because he was a corn cracker, because he was born in a log cabin, because he was barefooted most of the time. And there was a girl that he was a tiny bit sweet on, and he offered, as many country boys do, to tote her books. I never heard somebody say that until I had a friend from Louisiana in college. Tote your books? Tote your books? That's a pickup line in the country. But it's what country boys do, is offer to carry the girls' heavy books and walk her home. So Billy Branham offered to tote this girl's books home. Well, all those rowdy boys from school, 5 of them I think, caught him on the way home. And they'd roughed him up many times. But this time, they were extra pissed off because they liked that girl. And they weren't going to let that corn cracker, that country bumpkin, date this girl. So they waited for him on the way home, and they just beat him mercilessly. And when they had him pinned on the ground, 2 of them had his arms pinned, and the meanest one picked up a big stone and went to hit him, pound his face in with it. And I believe he did hit him. I've got it all. It's in, the account is in one of Owen Jorgensen's books called Supernatural, The Life of William Branham. And it's in the volume called The Boy and His Deprivation by Owen Jorgensen. Supernatural, The Life of William Branham, The Boy and His Deprivation. The entire tale is in there. So they heard him. They really beat him up bad. Well, they were going to kill him, but somehow he escaped and ran into the woods. Well, those boys were on their way home yucking it up, but they didn't understand that he was an expert woodsman and an expert marksman, and that he had a semi-automatic 22 long rifle, squirrel rifle, loaded above the door of his little cabin where him and his family lived. Well, he went and fetched it, ran barefooted, and fetched that rifle, took it down. Of course, it was always lubed and ready to go. These are the mountain men and the Minutemen that went before us. And he went to confront those boys. And yeah, they were yucking it up. Ha, 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 ha. Did you see that corn cracker? Did you see him when I had that rock? They were laughing it up, how bad they beat him up. And right in the middle was that boy that had the rock to hit him in the face. And he stepped out, young Billy Branham stepped out of the woods and had him dead to rights with that rifle. And he said, which one of you wants to die first so you don't have to watch the others die? And he pointed the rifle at one after another, and he said, because you will all surely die, starting with you. And he pointed that rifle at the boy in the middle that was going to bash his face in with that rock and hit him with the rock. We'll wait till the grinder shuts off to pick this up. Give me just a minute. This is the worst cappuccino of my week. I like this restaurant, but it's Arab-owned, and I just gotta tell you, I don't like the crew as much as other places. Up the street, the crew is so nice. You will all die one by one, starting with you, the one that hit him with the rock. And he pointed that rifle right at that boy's heart and pulled the trigger, squeezed it like a pro, and that rifle went click. Well, he wasn't done killing just yet. He racked the slide with his pinky finger and kicked out that defective round, which failed for whatever reason. This was their rifle for hunting and self-defense. And he fired it again, and it just went click. And he was really in a rage to kill those boys. Had it right. And he did his failure drill and hit the trigger again. By this time, those boys are running, screaming with their arms waving in the air every which way. And he attempted to fire every one of those 16 shots. And he sat down and put the rifle butt on the ground and just cried and cried. And then slowly and patiently, he picked up the 16 rounds and cleaned every one with the tail of his shirt and inserted them into the magazine. tubular mag of that rifle and pointed it at a tree and went bam, 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 bam. All 16 shots, bark flew everywhere, and the rifle functioned perfectly. But what did the angel say when he was a boy? Never smoke, never drink, or defile yourself with women, or in any other way, because when you grow up, the Lord will have an important job for you. And of course, his life would have been altered forever. You know, we are gunslingers. We use lethal force against superior adversaries or determined adversaries or those that come against us. They might even find us watching and waiting for them. We might even get the drop on them. And they need to not expect that there's going to be any hesitation or any mercy in the dark day. It's not what my teachers taught. But it would have altered the path of his life had he shot those boys dead. So here, 20 years later, 25 years later, finally, he meets with the angel face to face. You know, you may have a special call in your own life. Look back at the things that happened that didn't make sense and think that perhaps God was being jealous for you, that he gave you another shot, maybe when you didn't deserve it, or maybe when your enemies just had you dead to rights. It's happened to me so many times, I can't even tell you. And they slip on a banana peel. It's one reason they're scared to come after me, because they know that their chariot wheels will get pulled off if they come after the Lord's servant. That they find themselves fighting against God, against the lightning, and against the whirlwind, and against the sea, and against the great whales, against the holy angels, and against God himself, who's a consuming fire. 1946, in the cave, the angel appeared to Brother Brandon, clearly in the form of a man, spoke with him face to face, mouth to mouth, and said, "It is time for the healing anointing to manifest on your life, and you'll go around the world." So we went back to his little country church where it was time for the evening service. Now remember what we're talking about. St. Louis, Louis. Meet me in St. Louis, Louis. Meet me at the fair. It's a city that I don't particularly like, but it is a gem in our nation. And God has done so many beautiful things there. It was less than 100 years after Lewis and Clark were there with their axes and muskets that the World's Fair was there with electric light, Ferris wheels. There was gas lighting in all the city center. It was one of the most advanced and sophisticated cities in the world. People came from Europe to see the technology of that city at the World's Fair. The anointing just makes the demons howl. Want to see? Crazy beatniks. You know, some people come to Mexico just to do shrooms, to disciple under shamans, and to be communist anarchists. There's a lot of police in the city center too. I think the anarchists are planning something for today. Riot shields, police with riot shields, to cut off the streets going into the Zocalo. If 1,000 anarchists should show up, they'll block them on a street that's only 30, 40, 50 feet wide. So that's an artery that can be controlled to prevent them coming in, damaging the presidential palace. The president lives there. And just few months ago, they were throwing dynamite over the metal wall. You know, there's not a wall, there's just a little iron fence that you can see through most days. But when they know there's going to be a big event, a big riot, they put up a metal barrier that's about, I don't know, 10, 12 feet high. And the top is angled. Well, so they just threw dynamite over that. I heard probably 8 boo-boo, way louder than a rifle shot. They hate it that this nation's moving forward and putting bad guys in jail. So Billy Branham met with the angel. He goes down to preach. He didn't even have a suit. And he stood before his congregation and he began to tell them, and I remember these were people that loved him and believed in him and believed in the call on his life. And he told them that he met with the angel, that he believed for many years that he would strike out into the healing ministry, and that today he had met with the angel and that it was going to happen soon. And do you know what happened? A man came in the back doors with a telegram for Billy Branham from St. Louis. And it was a pastor in St. Louis. And why he would even ask Brother Branham, I don't know, I guess they knew one another from some tent meeting or brush arbor meeting, but his ministry was not known for miracles. And this pastor said, my little daughter is terribly vexed with an evil spirit. She claws at her face and screams night and day. She's lost so much weight. She's in agony constantly. Surely she is at death's door. Please come pray for her. Billy Branham's brother loaned him a suit, and he got on a midnight train to go to St. Louis. And they had to push through. They had to spend 2 or 3 days. Listen, many fellowships in St. Louis had fasted and gotten together all of their elders and prayed for this little girl and had not gotten the victory. And the poor, he said the poor thing she just clawed at her own face and screamed. And she was like a little skeleton. She'd lost so much weight. Couldn't eat, couldn't hold anything down. And was just in agony all the time, you know. And then he had a vision. And in the vision, the Lord showed him. Have the mother do this. You kneel and pray. You know, the Lord will show us how to get the victory if we push out of an impossible situation. Boom! That demon left. The girl was restored perfectly whole, got up out of bed, ate food, and they immediately scheduled a healing meeting. And all the pastors, you know, all the Protestant pastors from this strain or that strain, they were also shocked by this miracle that all of them came together and gave the floor to Billy Branham to have his first healing meeting in St. Louis in 1946. And a number of people got healed, and the visions were prolific. And then they scheduled a bigger one so that they had a bigger tent meeting. So knowing that, is it so strange that the tent meetings would begin now in St. Louis? And I would just like to put forth to you that maybe, just maybe, the Lord will come to pass, will bring to pass these verses one more time. Psalm 72:6. He shall come down like rain upon the mown grass. You know, we're in a drought. If a part of our nation is not in a drought, it's in a flood or hurricane zone, maybe the Lord will descend and He shall come down like rain upon the mown grass, as showers that water the earth. In his days shall the righteous flourish. We're in retreat right now. I'm a refugee in a foreign nation. You know, hunting season's coming. I miss my duck hunts, all right? I miss canoeing the Mississippi and setting up my duck blind, calling ducks and geese. The snow, tracking deer in the snow. Maybe we'll flourish. Maybe the Lord will turn our captivity here in this city, that he's turned it again and again. In his days, in his days shall the righteous flourish, an abundance of peace, so long as the moon endureth. He shall have dominion also from sea to sea, and from the river unto the ends of the earth. Maybe the Lord will cause our enemies to have their face ground in the dust again. One more time. It's all we need. The Lord's coming soon. There's not a lot of time left. Maybe he'll give us one more crushing victory. They that dwell in the wilderness shall bow before him, and his enemies shall lick the dust. You know, I'm real worried about the Isles. Philippines, Taiwan, Japan, those are the Isles, okay? Australia, those Isles are going to get crushed if God does not help our nation, the United States, right now. And watch my site, because I'm talking more and more about the military buildups in the East and how Trump and Trumpist forces have control of a good part of the military, and how the military is only now breaking over the threshold of being ready. I know we got this pride, like we can whoop anybody's ass, but our military was not ready. We were out of bullets. We had archaic weapon systems. Our nuclear was rusting apart. And morale was very, very low. And all that's been put back together, but it was not ready on January 20th. New weapon systems are coming online, and I'm talking 5, 6 different weapon systems that we need to sink the Chinese fleet and to pound them back into the Stone Age. They're coming online now. This week. Recent weeks. Recent months. JJ, there are space weapons. There are non-Newtonian weapons. But we're going to look at specific weapon systems that are deployed on Navy and Air Force and Army and Marine conventional forces and tactical nuclear forces. Watch my site, gospelgunslingers.com. Now you have to go to my subscribe star. And you know what? If you don't subscribe on my subscribe star, fill out the contact form with your email. I've got a mailing list now, and so I can send you when there's new articles, but you really have to follow me on all platforms. And that's all the information's right there to donate to. Please think about being a supporter and a partner. I pray for my partners, and I need my partners. I am a refugee. I am a stranger in a strange land. Yea, all kings shall fall down before him, all nations shall serve him. For he shall deliver the needy when he crieth. Let's just read this about the Isles one more time. Verse 10, the kings of Tarshish and of the Isles shall bring presents. The kings of Sheba and Seba shall offer gifts. Maybe I'll just tell you about the weapon systems right here, right now. Because we can do that just in a few minutes. It'll blow your mind. It's all coming out of St. Louis. Even the ancient tribes ruled from Cahokia. It's very close to St. Louis. I've done some other videos on that, and we kind of get into some mythology in those videos, and of course many of those same things are in the Bible, and so there's no shame in talking about something the Bible speaks prolifically about. But even ancient pre-Columbian peoples ruled from Great Pyramids just outside of St. Louis. It has been known forever that the confluence of the Missouri River and the Mississippi River was the heart of our nation and the seat of it in so many ways. God, do it one more time. Yeah, I'm going to tell about the weapon systems. Stay with me just for a few minutes. So I reported, Hal Turner actually reported on this, and it was very hush-hush in the news. We have 3 submarines, attack submarines of the Seawolf class. So these are not boomers. They're not ballistic missile submarines. They have vertical launch cells for Tomahawk missiles and other missiles, you know, to take down satellites and things, Mark 48 system. And they have torpedo tubes. But the main weapon, the main anti-ship weapon for a long time, up until 1997, I think from 83 to 97, was a Harpoon anti-ship missile that was specially formulated in a casing, waterproof casing, with a solid rocket booster. And it was made to fit into the torpedo tube. So in the torpedo room, they would load that missile. So this is all our attack submarines, and really even boomers could use this weapon system because they also have torpedo tubes. And Billy Bubba Clinton retired that. Didn't want us to have Harpoon heavy anti-ship missiles capable of being fired from our submarines. What a numbskull. We need that. You know, these are the traitors that have undermined our country little by little and depleted our weapon systems. You know, Obama ran the Air Force out of bombs. There were no bombs. Out. We need some bombs. You never know. That's why we have a military. So Trump had to start from zero. His generals came to him and he told us all this in Des Moines, Iowa, pretty close to the end of his term. He said, the generals came to me and said, "Sir, we're out of ammunition." And he said, "No president should ever have to hear that. We're out of ammunition?" "Yes, sir, we have no ammunition, sir." Well, he cranked up American industry. You know, we got to have cannon shells, 20 millimeter, 25 millimeter, 30 millimeter. We got to have howitzer shells. There's all different sizes. There's all different kinds of bombs and missiles. And he said, "No, we have so much ammunition, we don't know where to put it." He says all our nuclear has been revamped. All our missile systems, all of our missiles are new. All right, that wasn't the whole truth. The truth was he had authorized it, he had got Congress to fund it, but there's a research and development phase, there's a production phase, there's a testing phase, and then the final is the live fire and deployment phase. And I'm going to tell you the frightful truth. These weapon systems were not deployed. So just 18 months ago, Trump's in Des Moines saying, "Yeah, we got brand new Army tanks, M1 Abrams. We got a bunch of old ones too, but I saved the factory and all our missiles are new. Our nuclear has been revamped." They were not. R&D tested, produced, fire tested, and deployed. So we got attack submarines. I hit a button. I hope you can still hear me. Somebody please text me or just give me a thumbs up if you can still hear me. We've got probably 60 nuclear-powered attack submarines of the Los Angeles class, Seawolf class, and Virginia class, in that order. Thanks, guys. So we only made 3 of the Seawolf class, and then they went down to the smaller Virginia class, which is a cheaper, faster, you know, more compact and efficient, probably, and a little more modern in some ways. And between those 3 classes, we probably got 60 attack subs, all nuclear powered, drive. Never stop for gas. They got no anti-ship missiles. I mean, torpedoes are better than they used to be. They're homing torpedoes, they're smart torpedoes, they're fast. Some of them can go 100 miles. And if you look at the live fire test, I'm going to post the video with my article coming up. It absolutely broke the keel of this decommissioned ship, lifted it up out of the water. The torpedo did it and just snapped the keel. I mean, it went down like a couple of rocks. So it's a frightful weapon. But, you know, for a sneak attack, they only got 4 tubes. And they can't just reload them because they're wire guided, you know. They've got guide wires coming out of the torpedo tube. So it's not like one of those attack submarines could sink a whole fleet. Not after Bill Clinton defanged them. With that harpoon, it's called a UGM-84. Underwater. With that, yeah, they can rain hell on an enemy fleet. They can fire a whole bunch of those missiles. Nobody knows where they're at. They can still snoop and poop, sneak around. And it's a heavy, the harpoon is a heavy anti-ship missile, 500-pound warhead. So Trumponomics brought it back. And on this sinking just days ago, 10 days ago, the USS Chicago launched one of these totally revamped. You know, they use the old missile, but they upgrade all the components. New rocket boosters, totally upgraded guidance mechanism, seeker, data links. They've got data links now where they can talk to it and, you know, fly it. If it misses, it can come around for another attack. It can loiter over an area and just make some loops. So you can attack the same ship from 2 directions with one attacking ship, because the weapon, you know, the harpoon is controlled like that. The new ones are. And it's got the same solid rocket booster in the waterproof container. And I've got the video, it's on YouTube, USS Chicago SyncX. And they hammered that ship with the new harpoon ship missile, the recommissioned UGM-84. So all 3 of these submarines of the Seawolf class, they all steamed out of port at the same time. Very rare. This is a military surge. So they're expecting action. They're expecting to attack or for the U.S. to be attacked. But that's not all. So sometimes a submarine will fire Tomahawk missiles, which is a land attack missile. It's been in service a lot of years. It's even heavier. It's got a 1,000-pound warhead. But right now, there's a new version of it called Block 5A. And this is a maritime strike version. Now, it's supposed to come out. Hey, Brian, good to see you. Everybody's being real hush-hush about this. Nobody's going to come out and say, USS Chicago is now loaded with Block 5A Tomahawks. It's muy hush-hush. But it's on schedule. It's on schedule. And we have some test launches of the Block 5. And so, what nobody knows, what's not in the news, I'll just tell you. They're at sea. Tomahawk missile maritime strike Block 5A. And that's why our 3 Seawolf class submarines steamed out like they were in a hurry. And boy, they submerge and nobody knows where they're going to pop up. They can sneak over the North Pole. Pop up anywhere. But they're going to China. They're going to China, they're going to Taiwan. They're going to go support the Queen Elizabeth Strike Group. Taiwan, Australia, Japan, all the islands. South Korea too. They know what happened to Hong Kong, it's coming for them. So these are 2 weapon systems that are out right now. Is the Maritime Strike Block 5A totally revamped Tomahawk. 1,000-mile range. Yeah. And the UGM-84 torpedo tube launched harpoon missile. And that one they actually fired, and we have it on video. Coming up out of the water with the rocket engine going, and the tube pops off, and then the jet ignites. Off we go, baby. into the wild blue yonder. So that's just two. The other one is called the Joint Standoff Weapon. Well, the next one. And this is a really groovy stealth bomb. It has little wings that come out, and so it's a glide bomb. The wings, they're like this. The nose is that way. They're like this, and they fold out, and then it glides. So it can glide maybe 70 miles. Well, what they did is they jacked it up, unscrewed the tailpiece, and put in a compact turbojet motor, which extends the range from 70 nautical miles to 300. Joint Standoff Weapon -ER. Extended range. Guess when it's scheduled to come out? Right now. Now here's what's the most groovy about this. First of all, you can open up the nose cone, and it has a modular warhead which can be replaced with many warheads, including nuclear. 300 nautical mile range, 555 kilometers optimal. That weapon is made to go in the internal weapons base, right and left, of the F-35. Now it won't quite fit in the vertical takeoff variant, in the Stovall variant that's on the Queen Elizabeth carrier, on the USS America, and all our flat deck, Marine ships. That's why they're running paveways, Paveway 4, laser guided bombs in their internal base. But the F-35A and C, that is the Air Force version. You know, we reported not long ago 25 F-22 Raptors were stationed on Guam and Tinian, just ready to go in and rumble, ready to fly in with their stealth technology, take out radar installations, and take out shore batteries, and take out troublemaker the defenses of the Chinese mainland. Well, they have to use their stealth configuration, and it doesn't look good to have a stealth jet that's got all kinds of crud hanging from underneath of it. No, I'm not going to tell you a joke. Next time. So you can't have all of that hanging out in the breeze and running a stealth configuration. Their cannon pod is stealth. The internal weapons bays are stealth. They can carry some air-to-air missiles, but it's limited what will fit in the bays. But what will fit in the bays, you know, just days ago, it steamed across the Pacific now. The USS Carl Vinson steamed out of port with the very first operational squadron of the F-35C. So this is the full-size F-35. It has full-size weapons base because it doesn't have the lift fan in the center. I'm getting messages as we're talking. Oh no, I'm disconnected. Okay. Somebody please give me a thumbs up if I'm still